Welcome to the Unlocking the Club podcast, where we host honest and direct conversations about journeys of access, personal truth, and reclaiming space. We share our truth so that you can find the key to own your truth, honor your journey, and reclaim your space. Grab your keys, your wallet, your phone, and invite your friends to meet you at the club. Here's your host, Angela Taylor.
Hello, all, and welcome back to another episode of Unlocking the Club, a place where we peel back the layers on the truths that we live and the paths that we forge. I'm your host, Angela Taylor, and I'm thrilled to guide you through today's journey of insight and inspiration. Today's conversation is one that I think will resonate with anyone who's striving to make their mark in the business world, especially as a Black woman. We're going to dive into that dynamic and challenging world of public relations with a very special guest. In fact, a trailblazer and PR consultant who's reshaping the narrative for Black women entrepreneurs. In this episode, we're going to explore the hurdles and the triumphs of building a brand, owning your voice, and navigating spaces that often overlook the rich diversity of Black female leadership. We'll get real about the strategies that help us thrive and the resilience that it takes to stand tall in industries that are actually learning to appreciate our value. So whether you're on your commute, at the gym, or cozying up at home, tune in, turn up the volume, and get ready for a powerful exchange of ideas. Let's unlock some wisdom together right here on Unlocking the Club. Sharon Robustelli is an award-winning marketing communications specialist with over 2 decades of experience transforming brands and elevating voices in public relations, integrated marketing, and corporate branding. Her dynamic career spans industries like beauty, health and wellness, food and beverage, sports, and entertainment, with a special focus on consumer packaged goods. Sharon's a fierce advocate for female founders, passionately dedicated to helping women both amplify their brand and establish their authoritative presence in their respective industries. As the powerhouse behind Ten3 PR, Sharon leads a team that crafts a strategic and impactful executive visibility program, ensuring that women in business not only stand out from the competition, but also tell compelling stories that inspire action. Thanks for tuning in as we share some food for thought in a soulful conversation with Sharon Robustelli. Sharon, welcome to Unlocking the Club. How are you doing?
Thank you, Angela. Thank you so much. I'm doing great. I'm doing really well. How are you?
I am doing wonderful. I am so excited about this conversation for a number of reasons. Certainly the context and the content that we'll share over the course of the next 30 to 60 minutes, but mainly because this is a little bit of a reunion, folks. Sharon and I go way back, and we don't want to date ourselves at all. But when I was with the WNBA League office, I had the great fortune to work with Sharon, who did a phenomenal job of making sure the women of the WNBA were seen and heard and had a platform. And we're seeing them reap the benefits of the foundation that Sharon and her colleagues laid now when we have Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and Asia Jones, all these people doing some amazing things. So Sharon, I thank you for the work that you did to make sure that the messaging was on point back in the late 90s so that today these women can thrive.
Thank you so much for saying that. I feel like we were in such a different space at that time. And the things that we're seeing now with the recognition that these female athletes are getting, with the brand deals that they're getting, the social media attention, the trends, the fashion, those were things I remember sitting in a conference room and saying, this is where we need to go. This is where we need to go. And at the time, it's whatever the reason, we weren't ready. Nobody was ready. I don't even know if the women themselves were ready at that time. But I just am so happy and delighted when I see what's happening now and when I hear people talking about the WNBA fans, and they're not all little girls. They're not all dads and daughters. They're fans of the sport. So I'm so happy that they're finally getting the recognition they deserve. And there's a long way to go still, but this has been phenomenal to watch.
It has been. And you remind me, I was on a flight recently and I was sitting next to a gentleman. And typically in the conversation, something comes up. What is the work that you do? What have you done? All those different things. In this particular conversation, we hadn't talked anything about my involvement in women's sports at all. And in the midst of the conversation, he pauses and he's like, "Have you been watching the WNBA?" He's like, "My daughters and I love watching." And it would just warm my heart to know, unprompted, that there was somebody in the universe that felt like he compelled to make sure I was watching it. As a woman,
Mhm.
we hadn't even talked
Yeah.
about sports or anything like that. And I think that's so important. And you're right, like the messaging, like who we were back then and who we thought we could be. It's really important for you to be intentional about that and to maybe think bigger than you think is possible. And you being in that room and in that space was really important back then. I want to talk about you being in that room and what the genesis of you being in that room. So we read your extraordinary bio. We know that you are now the founder of Ten3 PR. But Sharon, I have been fascinated by the genesis of the work that many of us do. Oftentimes, there's a catalyst or a trigger early in our life, in our childhood, or as young adults, that once we uncover it, it actually helps us to figure out our life's purpose. So I'm curious for you, Sharon, what's the catalyst or the genesis or the origin story of the journey to all of the amazing work that you're doing in PR?
It's funny. I have one of those stories where I don't know how common this is, but I actually went to school for public relations, and that's the job that I've basically always done,
Mm,
except for a couple of detours. I had a couple of detours, but I always came right back. And it really started in college. When I started school, I was an English major. And I was just thinking about what am I going to do as an English major? Like, what's my job going to be? I love writing. I love that, but I don't know what job that would be.
mm,
So I believe it was the second semester of my freshman year. I was like, I need to change majors because I just don't envision what an English major would do. And so I looked at the curriculum and they had communications. And for communications, you could have an emphasis in journalism or an emphasis in public relations. So
mm,
I figured I knew what journalism was. And I was like, that doesn't quite feel right for me. Like, I don't want to work for a newspaper. I don't want to like be on TV. I don't want to be a broadcast host. So I'll just do the other thing. And that was literally as much thought as went into it was, yes, I like communications. That sounds good. I like to talk. I like to write. So I'll do the other thing. And I had no idea what public relations was. But once I got into it, I loved it. And what I saw that really motivated me was that people were actually, our school, I went to a state school, Pennsylvania State School, Mansfield University of Pennsylvania. I'm a New Yorker, but I got a full ride to this school that I had never heard of, and I went.
nice.
So, what I found out was that we actually could see in the simplest form how public relations actually helped people
Mm,
achieve their goals. And that's what motivated me. It wasn't abstract. It was very much someone has a need, they need visibility for a product, a service, and you guys, you students can do that by getting them interviewed on TV, getting them interviewed on the local radio stations. So that was really what motivated me was I understood it. And it
yes.
wasn't like I had to go from A, B. It was like I understood from A to Z what we were there to do and that there was a way to do it, which was through a gatekeeper, which is the media.
Mm.
So that was my motivation.
Okay. Well, so what I'm hearing in your motivation is that the PR and communication was the vehicle for you to actually use the tools, the writing and the speaking that was at your core something that you love to do. And I'd love to dissect. So, writing and speaking, what was the catalyst and the genesis for you falling in love with that or feeling the need to want to do that sort of work?
Well, I'll tell you, for me, it was from early childhood. My books were like my saving grace. I think I fell in love with fantasy. I fell in love with fiction. And it was just, me being a child of 70s and 80s. It was very much that Gen X story that you hear, latchkey kid, single mom, worked many jobs, me and my older sister. And we, basically had to, we came home from school. My mom got home from her job after we got home from school. So we would, let ourselves in, have a snack, sit on the couch and read a book. So that was my first introduction to the written word and what it could do and the power of it. And so no matter what was going on in my actual life, which I had a lovely childhood, I grew up on Long Island, great place to grow up, but I still had those insecurities of just a kid who just doesn't necessarily feel like they fit in. So for me, rather than going out in the streets and trying to fit in with all the other kids, I would be in the house with my nose in a book. So that was it. And I think from there, it was this feeling of, if I could ever use the written word the way my favorite authors did, the
Yes.
way, in a way to change someone's perspective or to give them a glimpse of a life that they will never know or whatever it is. So I fell in love with the written word, and I always was a writer. I wrote poetry from a very young age. At that same time that we worked together at the WNBA was a very 90s story. I was a slam poet. I was a performance and competition poet. So I went all around New York, all around New York City competing. And I always have just had this passion for what language and the written word could do for me and for other people.
Mm, like that right there, the power of language. There's so many applications right now where language matters. The words we use, the tone that we use matter, whether it's in our personal lives or if it's in our professional lives when we're developing a brand. And so the fact that you can trace this evolution back to the desire just to read books and to escape from reality, even though it was a great reality that you had in your childhood, how that is now allowing you to really help Black women and women entrepreneurs build their own brand and tell their own stories, which I applaud and kudos to you for doing that. But it's taken a little bit of time for you to get to this point of you having your own PR firm. And I think on a recent episode of Smart Agency with Jason Swink, you stated that you're an agency owner out of spite. Please elaborate on that.
Absolutely. As you said, it's taken some twists and turns to get to the point where I felt comfortable and ready. Not comfortable because you're not comfortable when you go out and strike out on your own, but I felt ready to strike out on my own. But before that, I had, gone in a number of different directions, still in the PR realm. But as you said, when you were sharing my background and experience, I started out in entertainment. And I spent about 8 years being the publicist. And I was a publicist for people who were really, really famous. My very first job, I was an assistant to a vice president at an entertainment agency that does not exist anymore. But they had all of old Hollywood. I mean, my boss, her clients were Gregory Peck, Jason Robards, Dolly Parton, Whoopi Goldberg,
What?
who was just coming off of her one woman show. And I believe when I worked with her, Whoopi had just done like Jumpin' Jack Flash or whatever. So talk about dating myself. I was the little assistant who, had to answer the phone and it would be Gregory Peck, and I'd almost have a heart attack trying to transfer the call.
That is amazing.
And what that taught me is that, and I did that, and then I did it till I progressed and I had my own clients who, Eartha Kitt was my client, Tyra, another beautiful Black model named Rishamba, who was just, man, she was incredible because she was one of the few models that was like, I'm not going to wear wigs. I'm not going to change who I am. If you hire me, you hire me. And she had a short, natural haircut, and she just had such conviction. And I remember that was the days of like the everybody had weaves were like new and popping, so everybody was coming in and getting a makeover. And Rashemba was like, this is who I am. So either you book me or you don't book me. So what that whole thing taught me though is that I wanted to do more. I wanted to do more because as an entertainment publicist, my job was to promote my clients when they had a project to be promoted. So then you're working, you're hot and heavy, you're booking all the shows and all that stuff. But then the rest of the job was keep them out of the news, keep them out of the press. And that was kind of as far as it went. We weren't building people necessarily, and there wasn't a strategy. And I thought back in like my 8th year of being an entertainment publicist. One, I'm not a starstruck kind of person. So it was great to be at an award show with Eartha. I loved that woman to death, but I wasn't like, I'll do anything to be in the company of these people. So the sheen wasn't as high polished as it might be for some people. And when I sat back, I said, I learned so many things in school that I'm not applying. I wanted to be a marketer. I wanted to be a strategist. So that's when I switched and went to bigger agencies that were focused on consumer packaged goods and corporate PR, where I started doing PR for products and launching products and introducing audiences and consumers to new technology and things like that. And that's where I was like, all right, this is what I want to do. And so now it's like the third phase is I wanted to take that strategic approach to helping women like me, women who maybe they've had successful corporate careers, but it still wasn't that thing that really got them going. It still didn't give them that fire in the belly. So now they're on their founder journey and they've
Right.
either created a product, launching a product, they have a service, or they just have knowledge to share. So
Yes.
now what I do is I help Black female founders get their story out there and share their knowledge. And if they do have a product or service, I help to launch that and share that with their target audiences. And now it's like all of those things that I've done have been put together in a way that I'm like, yes, this is how I choose to be of service today.
We just did a remarkable job of unpacking what your life's journey is about. You talk to young people these days and they want to get to the finish line yesterday. And what you just so eloquently outlined is that over time, we start to peel the layers of the onion back to get closer to whatever it is our destiny was. At the beginning, you're learning what it is that you can do and your talent and your expertise or your authority, as you've said. And then eventually you get to now, how do I want to apply and leverage my authority? And that may not happen right away. And so I appreciate like you being able to articulate that arc. I think it's a really important point for any of us, wherever we are in our journey. It's not just about our age, but it's our particular moment in time on any specific journey. When you're early on in that journey, it may take time for it to unfold, but every process, every moment matters and is helping you to get to the root of what it is that you're hoping to do. But you also, I want love to unpack a couple other things you mentioned. You talked about Rashomba and saying that if you're going to hire me, you're going to hire me for me. I love that. And it's so difficult for many of us, particularly those inside of marginalized identities, to have that chutzpah, if you will. And you started the conversation saying that you had to think twice about, am I ready to strike out on my own? So, how do you navigate those two juxtapositions in perspectives of, am I ready? Am I capable? Will I be able to thrive or survive on my own? And this is who I am. I'm going to do what I know is best for myself.
Well, that's where the becoming a founder out of spite comes in.
Mm,
So bringing it back to that, I have worked with all different PR agencies, the top multi-billion dollar PR agencies or divisions of those agencies. And I got to a point where I was in a situation where I was like, this just doesn't feel right to me. Like I came into this particular job with one expectation. But yet, once I got there, I wasn't really given all that free reign that I was promised to implement it. And so I soured on it pretty quickly, but I'm somebody who I'm learning now. But I used to have a very hard time saying no. I would have a very hard time. I'm not a quitter. So I'm
Yeah.
just going to stick it out. So I stuck it out for 2.5 years. And I knew it wasn't right for me at 2.5 weeks. But
Mhm.
here I am, still going, still trudging along. And so by the end, and what ended up happening was that I got laid off. The office that I was in closed. And so my job was eliminated, which again, I see that as God was doing for me what I could not do for myself, what I would not do for myself. And the relief that I felt when I got the phone call was like that was the catalyst. That
Yes.
was
The
it.
light
I
bulb.
was
Yep.
it was the light bulb moment. It was like my the visceral reaction that I had was thank God. Like, okay, all right. And I just relaxed and everything changed. And where the spike comes in, it's so funny that I said that. And I think during that interview with Jason, he was saying we were talking about agencies and what we like and what we don't like, because that's like
Yeah.
his whole thing.
Yeah.
And it was that we talked about unlocking the club. This was my first time really getting a real view of what was going on in the club,
Mm.
where I had gotten to a certain point, that like middle management. And at this point, I was more senior. I was as senior as I had ever been. And I saw what was happening in those rooms. I saw how decisions were being made. I saw how inefficient the processes were. And my thought was, if these people, with this skill set and with this mentality, are successful and are running this division of this multi-billion-dollar company, I can do this. I can do it, and I can do it in a way that makes me feel comfortable and where I don't feel like I'm going against my moral compass or any of that. And so that's where the spike comes in, where I was just like, my goal right now in the first year of running the business was to be better than what I saw, and
Yeah.
to do it better than what I saw, and to change those inefficiencies and have a team that wants to work with me, that wants to do the job, that wants to be of service to our clients, and have clients that are happy. Because the other part of my job had been all the clients were just low key angry, and I had to deal with that and then like broker the client response to the team so the team wouldn't be down and keep the morale up. And when it came down to it, the reason that the clients were disgruntled was that it took so much time for them to see results. The
Yeah.
process was so inefficient. They were being charged these huge fees and carrying whole departments of people who never touched their business. And I never wanted that for myself or for anyone that worked with me. So that's where that notion came from, where I was just like, no matter what, I'm going to do better than that.
Yes. Well, hey, folks, Sharon Robustelli just spoke all the tea unlocking the club, because we talk about like the journey. So we oftentimes look at whether it's the boardroom, the penthouse, or whatever it is inside these organizations, and we aspire to get in that room. And sometimes when we get into the room, we realize that room isn't comprised of the people we want to be associated with, working with, or it's not the work that we want to be able to do. And one of the things that we're trying to do on this show, Unlocking the Club, is to really have that conversation, as we spend so much time battling and trying to overcome to get inside of that room, when what we need to realize is, what room do I want to design? What's the club I want to design and belong to, where I can be like Roshamba, be myself, bring my full self and thrive, versus trying to show up some way that is not authentic to me, that is frustrating and traumatic and debilitating to a certain extent. And so you talked about, Sharon, early on in that segment, that there was a moment in your time where you're like, I got to get through this. I can't quit. I can't give up. Let me suck it up and keep doing something that maybe I'm not enjoying. And I'm curious, I've had a very similar experience. And it was until something outside of my purview forced me to say, this is over, right? And finally be able to walk away. But otherwise, I would have stayed in that bad situation, trying to prove myself and trying to whether prove to myself that I could overcome and withstand, or to prove to others that I was worthy of being there. And I wonder what's at the root of that. Like, where do we get that message that that's what we have to do versus recognizing maybe this isn't the space for me now. Let me find another club.
Yeah. I think it's twofold. I think one is for me, certainly what we see, what's modeled for us,
Mm-hmm.
and I think my mom had this tremendous work ethic. And I thought that a big part of being an adult was this ability to be self-sufficient. And she, worked a job that I would say she was underpaid for, but she stayed that 35 years or whatever at this same job.
Yeah.
And then if things got tough and we needed something, she would get a second job. And sometimes she had a third job. So what was modeled for me was self-sufficiency and this idea that no matter what, you don't quit and you show up, and
Yeah.
maybe your job is not what you want it to be, what you need it to be, but that it's not supposed to be.
Yes.
It's not supposed to be. Does it pay your bills? Do you have a roof over your head? Do you have food in the fridge? Do you have gas in the car? That's what your job is. So I think
Yes.
for me, this idea of joy in work was not prioritized.
Yeah.
It was just like you go to work and you come home. You don't, your joy it's compartmentalized.
Yeah.
So that's what I saw. And it wasn't like my mom hated her job, but it was her job.
Yes.
And when
Yes.
she came home, she didn't have any reason to do anything related to that job. It wasn't about her as a person. It was about, when she finished her shift, somebody else came in and picked up the shift,
Yes.
you know.
Yes.
And so there's that. And I think also being, of the generation, that we're from, it's like there was, for me, certainly there was no model of what a professional, like white collar job was. So this
Yes.
is what I thought it was. It was work. And if I have a job, I'm grateful that I have it and I'm just going to trudge through it.
Yeah.
So that was part of it. And I think the second piece of it is this idea of I have to prove something to myself,
Yeah.
right? It's like, yes, I prove something to other people, but I know, and I knew from an early age that I can't please other people, but it didn't stop me from trying.
Yes.
But
Yes.
also, right? But I always would put up these challenges for whatever goal it was almost like I had these self-imposed hurdles that I had to cross. And if I got through these hurdles, I had arrived. I was worthy. I was better. I was whatever. But what I didn't know was that there are already hurdles. I don't need to put up the self-imposed hurdles.
Exactly. Yes.
I don't need to gamify this
Yes.
because the
Yes.
game is already in play.
Yeah.
So I would be better off navigating the game that exists rather than creating my own.
Yes. Right. And you talked about generations a little bit inside of that. I think that our parents' generation didn't have agency in being able to have the luxury to pick and choose opportunities. You got a job and you were happy to be able to keep that job so that you can take care of your family and put food on the table and make sure that there was a roof over their head. And so they weren't looking to the side or not. And I don't know if this showed up for you, Sharon, but it showed up for me. Loyalty there was this little echo of loyalty in the back of my mind was I stay here because I'm loyal. I want to be that loyal employee. And I wish that I had maybe unraveled that a little bit earlier on in my career because I stayed long beyond the expiration date because I was trying so hard to be loyal to maybe an organization that wasn't being loyal to me. And just because our parents' generation felt like they had to stay in a job for 27 years, that didn't mean that we had to do the same thing and that we can actually learn more about who we are and who we wanted to be by picking and choosing our battles and going to different places. But I also wonder on this topic if there's also a sense of being grateful for being employed. Like other people look at you and you're in the club. So you are on the phone with Eartha Kitt. You're going to award shows with Eartha Kitt and getting these amazing phone calls. And from the outside looking in, they don't know what you're dealing with and navigating on a daily basis, why would you want to leave that? Why would you want to leave the NBA, WNBA? And I think that factors into our decision making as well, of those external expectations of who we are and who we're associated with. Has that shown up for you?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think for me, it manifests in this idea of associating who I am with what I do.
Mm,
And it was so easy in a way to show up and be able to say, oh, yeah, I work for the communications department of the WNBA. Boom. That's who I am. That's who I want you to see me as.
you get
Done.
callbacks, they get your
Yeah,
emails responded to.
yeah, exactly. It's like, that's it. And then, or I'm a vice president at this company and we represent Procter and Gamble product, whatever it was. And for me, what needed to happen was I needed to start to peel that away and peel away this idea that who I am is tied to what I do. And it had to be where I had a job where on the tip, it didn't roll off your tongue. I work for an agency that you never heard of, but in the world of PR, it's very well known. And I launch products that hopefully you'll hear about soon.
Yes.
So it was that humbling of I'm somebody at a job. I'm not, I don't have this like badge of honor because of this name recognition of who I work for or anything like that. And I'll tell you a quick story of when this really hit home for me. It was probably about 10 years ago. I'm scrolling on Facebook and I'm someone who's like, I'm not nostalgic. So Facebook doesn't really do it for me because
Mm,
everybody is from my way past. But I keep it because I have family all over the country and I want them to see my kid growing up and wish me a happy birthday or whatever. But
right.
I'm scrolling through Facebook and I get a friend request from somebody I had not seen or talked to in over 20 years. And so I'm like, hey, his name's David. David, how are you? What's going on? And his first response to me, you know how you put your job in your Facebook description? This is where you could put where you work.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, executive vice president at blah, blah, blah. And his note to me said, hey, I see you're VP of some company. I hope you're doing well. And that
Mm,
was like, yeah,
yeah.
that's it. VP of some company. It wasn't about like, to him, it was like, it sounds like you have a good job, but he knew me for who I am. And it was
Yes.
about how am I? And
Yes.
that was one of those moments where I was like, this other stuff doesn't matter. It
Mm,
does not matter. And I was the one attaching so much importance and relevance to it. It wasn't
yeah.
coming from me. It wasn't outside pressure necessarily. It was me because I was showing up with that as leading with that.
Well, and how that shows up actually in our pricing process. One of the challenges that I know I've experienced and continue to experience as an entrepreneur, and I hear so often from other entrepreneurs similar sentiments, particularly female entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of color, is how do you set your rate or determine your value? Eh, I think that you have this belief that we must enter a space before this positive thinking, like I need to have proof that I'm good enough or that I'm delivering value to you before I'm going to charge you what I think my value is. Like, how do you, as an entrepreneur, how did you navigate setting your rates and knowing, look, I have authority, I am the expert at what I've done and what I'm doing and what I can do for you, and so you are going to pay me for my value. I'm not going to discount my rate or my value before I even get a chance to deliver for you. How has that journey been for you?
Yeah, it's been interesting. When I first started Ten3 PR, we had a chance to pitch a client that sounded like they were going to be huge, like monthly retainer. It was going to be well into the six figures at the end of the year. And I put together this whole pitch team to help me pitch it. And what it came down to was that we put all this time into it. I was paying these people just to work on the pitch, and we submitted. It sounds good. We're going to the second round. And then something happened on this prospective client's end where it never happened. It never came to fruition. And part of what was going on was that they kept coming back and trying to negotiate the rate and nickel and dime and nickel and dime and nickel and dime. And I said to my husband, who is one, it's wonderful in as a woman in business to be have a partner who is not in who's like in the arts.
Yes, like
You know, my
completely
husband's
different.
a musician. Yeah,
You can
he does
escape.
business because he has other skills as well, but he's a musician. So he was like, listen, one, we don't want clients who are going to treat you that way. It shows already that they don't have respect or value what you do. And also, if they don't have money, we don't want clients who don't have money.
Exactly, right?
Yeah,
That's at the top of the list. If you can't pay, we can't play.
we can't play. And so he just put it in such a simple way where I was like, you know what? This experience has taught me that the right partners will act right. They'll do the right thing. And also that my what I'm offering to people is my expertise. Whether it's a client that is hiring, like where I'm working on that business, and it's just like for a lot of the female founders, it's me, them, and my assistant. It's not a whole team because they don't require a whole team
Yeah,
necessarily. And it's very easy for me to have to build that relationship because I really need to know who they are before we go out and create a personal brand. So I like to be
yeah,
very involved. But it's like you are paying for the expertise. You're paying for my 2+ decades of experience. So you're not paying me for hours. I don't like to bill hourly. And I'll get clients who say, well, can you bill hourly? And I'm like, I can. But just know that we will always meet your goal. So that means that I'm going to have to come back to you sometimes to say to you, in order to meet your goal, it's going to take 4 more hours than we originally thought. So now you got to pay me for 4 more hours. So
yes,
just pay the fee that I've already given you,
yeah,
and you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about how long it takes us. You don't have to worry about if this opportunity comes quickly or slowly. And then everybody can just do their job and you can reap the benefits. And that just works so much better. But sometimes it does take talking people into it or giving them the perspective of here's your options. And in the end, if you want to pay hourly because it sounds better to you right now, you will end up spending either more time with me and my team to discuss
right,
what how those hours are being allocated, or you're going to end up paying more.
yeah,
So don't worry about that.
yeah,
Don't worry
yeah.
about it, you know?
Well, and I think you said just because it's easy for me doesn't mean it's easy. So, like, oftentimes people forget you can probably do a very complex problem or project in a shorter amount of time than it would take somebody else, another agency that doesn't have that experience or that expertise. And you should be compensated for that. Just because you can do it quicker doesn't mean it should be less expensive,
Right,
right?
exactly, exactly. And that's what I would see in, the agency world, not all of them, but many of them. It's like, to the credit of big agencies, they have a lot to navigate, and their senior leaders have a lot that they're navigating. They're not just focused on the actual business or the client projects. They've got to balance the P&L. They've got to
Yeah.
make sure that their teams are being utilized. There's a lot happening. They're reporting to a board of directors. There's a lot going on. So I'm not saying this to say that they should be as hands-on as I am,
Mm.
but what I find is that when you are working with big teams and you get the most junior levels of people as a client working on your business, it takes them longer. It also takes the involvement of the more senior person to guide them through it. And you're paying for all of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
paying for all that. And you're being billed hourly.
Yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
paying for all that. So for me, it's like, yeah, I can cut through a lot of those layers by just being hands on. But also when I do build teams, and the way I work with clients is I build the team for you. So
Mm.
you're not just inheriting whoever's on my staff. There
Mm.
are people who are go-to people who work with me from project to project to project because they're that good and we work
Yeah.
that well together.
Yeah.
But when I build the team, those people also treat the work as if it's their business as well. Like they're all running a small business too. So that's the kind of attention that you get, and that's the kind of efficiency
yeah,
that you get. So I find that I am very seldom having to talk clients off the ledge because there's something that they expected that we're not delivering. I very seldom have to have conversations with clients about, oh, I'm so sorry that this staff member didn't understand what you needed. It's like, no, we're efficient. We're efficient and effective, and people see why they're paying what they're paying, and they also don't have to worry about it. We have
yeah.
very few conversations about money once the contract is in play.
Well, I'm going to ask you for a little bit of free advice for our listeners and viewers. Why is it important for women, especially Black women in leadership, to develop a personal brand?
It's very important because, one, as I was saying before, we don't at all have the luxury of having that gravitas and commanding that level of respect just by walking in the room and just by having the title or having the job that we have.
Mhm.
Because in this society, and we're seeing it now, I don't want to get into politics, which I don't even think a lot of this stuff is politics. It's just America.
Yeah.
What's happening is that there's somebody has their own perception, and you can be undermined and your authority can be undermined without you doing a single thing, just by showing up as a Black woman in society and in the room that you're in. So it's extremely important to do the work when you're a leader, especially if you want to branch out on your own. But even before so, I have clients who are C suite level at their companies, and they're like, I don't feel like I'm being regarded in that way.
Yeah.
So I want you to help me build my personal brand.
Yeah.
So that's one reason why it's important, so that it's not you.
Yeah.
No one, you don't have to be the only messenger of your
Yes.
story, right?
Yes.
You can leverage the media. You can leverage press. You can write stories. You can contribute to articles. You can be in business publications. If they're not going to cover you as a story about you because there's something that's not necessarily going to stop the presses for them, what I do is I work with the publications to have you be a contributor. And we ghostwrite articles for our clients. We align with the client on what's going on. The client has
Mhm.
full approval on it,
Yeah.
but not everyone is a writer, not everyone is a journalist, but they have a story to tell. So
Yeah.
our process is we align on what that story is, we create our kind of universe of messaging, and then whatever the opportunities are, my team and I can take it and run with it and then just come to you as a client and say, this is what we would like to say, and you make it your own or tell us how to make sure that this is factually correct. And
Yes.
so in the end, these women are contributors for Entrepreneur Magazine. They're contributors for Business Insider. They're contributors for their trade industry publications. And it's
Nice.
really important because that third party credentialing is gives you that ability to say, don't take my word for it.
Yeah.
Take my word for it. Here I am. This,
Yes.
if you know about me, here you are.
That's
You know,
awesome.
that's it. Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. One of the things that we say oftentimes with our consulting company is you want to put yourself in a position to ask for 100% of what you want 100% of the time. And in order to do that, your brand has to be about delivering value. And all the things that Sharon just outlined about your process with your clients is essential. So whether you have a PR agent or consultant or you're doing this on your own, it's incredibly important for you to be able to start to shape your own narrative and make sure you're designing your brand and make sure that the feedback that you're getting from others in your stratosphere reaffirms the brand that you want to be having on display. And so, Sharon, that again, great insight into why women and Black women in particular need to have their brand. And I'm sure most of our listeners are as inspired as I am by your journey and the wisdom that you shared. Before we continue, it's actually time for the back nine, our favorite rapid fire segments where we get a closer peek at the lighter, more personal side of our guests. So stick around because right after this quick break, we're going to dive into some thought provoking questions that let you get to know our phenomenal guest, Sharon Robustelli, a little bit even better. You won't want to miss it. We'll be right back on the Back Nine. I'm your host, Angela Taylor, and it's time for the Back Nine with Sharon Robustelli, where we get a little bit more personal and have some fun with some rapid fire questions to let you into the world of this incredible guest. So let's dive right in with Sharon and see what we can uncover. Ready? Here we
All
go.
right. Let
All
me straighten
right.
up my chair. I'm ready. I'm ready.
All right. Well, Sharon, I think the first question is what I ask guests all the time is, besides your own home, where is the place that you feel safest to be yourself?
Besides my own home, I would say I feel safest to be myself in the gym.
Nice. Nice.
at,
Yeah.
at the gym. And, for me, going to the gym and working out is just about like, I want to be a very old person who can still like go on the walking tour. You know what I mean? Like, it's about mobility. So I'm
Yes.
doing a whole lot in there, but I feel like I have every right reason, ability to take up space when I'm taking care of myself.
Yeah, self-care, right? And the gym, whatever that is, if it's going on a hike or going swimming or a bike ride or going to a gym, it allows us to set those boundaries as well, where we are constantly letting other people seep into our space. The gym, when you're on that bike or that treadmill, that is your own space. You can put your headset on and escape, and people aren't tapping you on the shoulder, asking you for this or that. I love that. That's a place
Exactly.
that you feel safe yourself. Well, you've talked a little bit about your journey that you started reading books as a young child and fell in love with the written word in a variety of different ways. I'm wondering if on your journey, was there something or any situation that you typically walked into with trepidation that you no longer do? And if so, what was the catalyst for you kind of getting through that?
Yeah, I would say I it's interesting because I would say when I walked into professional settings that weren't necessarily my workplace, like a conference or a networking event, or you're at an awards and they have that like cocktail hour beforehand, I used to just have like a panic attack that I had to do something in a professional space that was unstructured
Yeah.
and where it was just about me navigating that room. And for me, the change came when I just started to realize, and I don't know how or why it happened, but I started to realize that everybody else had that same so
Exactly.
nobody knows what to do in those situations. Nobody stands at the threshold of a room and says, "All right, I'm killing it." Maybe people do, but especially not women, and certainly not Black women. But like most people in general, that is a dreaded situation. So once I realized that, I'm like, all right, I'm not alone. It has nothing to do with me. This is not my experience. It's a human experience,
Mm,
so let me just do it the best way I can. And for me, the other piece to that was that I was always worried that I wasn't interesting, right? What do I bring? What can I bring with me that's going to make me interesting? Did I see all the Academy Award nominated movies? Did I read all the blurbs I was supposed to read this morning in the Wall Street Journal? Like, how am I going to be interesting? So the turning point was my goal is no longer to be the most interesting person in the room. It is to be the most interested
yes.
person in the room.
Yes.
And it changes everything.
It changes everything. Like one of the things that I think that we aren't taught in school is we learn how to speak, we learn how to write, but we don't learn how to listen. And if you can show up in a room and be more interested than you are interesting, then people are going to lean in and want to get to know you. And so, my superpower is listening. I've discovered that over time, and I used to poo-poo it. It was easy for me. And it was no big deal. It wasn't as glamorous as those folks who were eloquent facilitators or speakers. But I've learned that it's remarkably important. So I'm curious, Sharon, for you, what is your superpower?
My superpower is I can pretty much get to the crux of what somebody needs pretty easily, pretty quickly. I have a power of discernment that I have, oh, as I get older, I've come to appreciate.
Yeah.
And it's nothing that I take any credit for. It's not like I took some course to figure out how I could be, Columbo or, you know, it's just something that I was born with. And looking back, I was able to do this from a very, very young age,
Mm.
where I just kind of know what you need
Yeah.
and how I can play a role in that.
Awesome.
And from a client service business, it's an invaluable skill because I have a process. When someone is interested in working with me, we have a process. First, I do what's called, a fit call, 15 minutes, and let's see if we're right for each other. And then if it sounds like we want to work together, then we do a second call, and I call that my elevate and illuminate call.
I
And
love it.
it's 1.5 to 2 hours. They pay for it. And the reason they pay for it is at the end of that call, I'm going to give them the roadmap based on our conversation for what you need to do to elevate your personal brand and to amplify your voice and your message. I'm going to give you that roadmap. So you can do it and you can do it,
Yeah.
or you can hire us to do it. And if you hire us to do it, then what you paid for that consultation goes toward the contractual fee. But the reason that I mention that is because I have a process within that 1.5 to 2 hours where I ask you 7 different questions. But in the end, every single time I go and create that roadmap, I realize that I already knew. I
Yeah.
already knew. Not that I didn't need the questions because it gives me details and it reassures you that I heard you,
Mm.
but I already knew. I knew what you needed. I knew how you needed it to be presented, and I knew sometimes what you really want that may be beyond what you stated.
Right. No, that's awesome. Well, and you're a storyteller. And so you're able to take these threads of somebody's story and their journey and be able to put it together in a succinct way that is able to amplify, elevate, and amplify and illuminate what their story is. So when you think about the world that we live in today and the spaces that you navigate, Sharon, what's a story that needs to be told?
Hmm. I love that question.
Mm.
I think a story that needs to be told is around how our roles have changed, honestly, since 2020 with the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, COVID, the election, all of those things. Somehow I feel like we're all, there's this shared trauma
Yeah.
that has happened and nobody talks about it.
Yes.
Nobody talks about it, and we're expected just to ease into going from you can't go out, you can't call the police, you can't do any of these things to now all of a sudden we're supposed to be back at work, back in the office. And I just feel like there's that the unspoken part of it is what's still holding people back from making those real connections. It's like we're basing our actions on something we remember
Mm.
things being and a way that we remember being, but things have shifted and
Yes.
there's no roadmap for how to navigate life
Mm.
post that shift.
Please tell this story. It's fascinating. I had not thought about it in those terms, but you're exactly right. Like we were living it, whether it was for 6 months, a year, 18 months for in this little silo where I think people were revealing themselves. I was much more honest and candid with myself. I was focusing on self-care and finding my own space and the things that I enjoy doing and finding a way to say no. It was so much easier to say no back then because you didn't have to have an excuse, right?
Yeah.
And then there was this, we went from 0 to 60 overnight. We're getting back to normal. And we didn't discuss it. We didn't like ease into it. We didn't figure out what we wanted to retain from that period of time and what we learned and what was important for us to incorporate into our next life. We got back to work. And I
Yeah.
think that that is a really important story to tell. You're right. I love that. Well, also, I would love to find out. We during that time, I was exploring myself, and I found out a lot about myself, things I like, things that I didn't like so much. I'm wondering for you, Sharon, when you're at your best, however you personally define being at your best, what's true for you?
What's true for me when I'm at my best is that I start each day with some introspection,
Mm,
with some silence. I'm at my best when I've committed to, but in a way that's very fluid, a morning routine, and I haven't missed any of those steps. So my ideal morning routine is I pray, I meditate, I go to the gym.
mm,
That's it. And then there's like walk the dog, whatever. But those three things have to be in place. So that sets me up for my whole day. So when I can do that without it being a burden or where I have to wedge it in and it can just be the way I start my day, I am definitely going to be at my best because I've already done something for myself, which is an accomplishment. And
mm,
I'm a firm believer that if you want to have self esteem, you need to do esteemable acts.
mm,
And that first esteemable act is taking care of me. And then
mm.
I'm available. I'm
Yeah,
available, I'm helpful, and I'm happy.
I love that. I love that. Well, when you're at your best, Sharon, what are some of the projects that you're working on, and where can our listeners and viewers find you?
Absolutely. Right now, I'm working on a couple of projects with some wonderful Black female founders. I'm working with a filmmaker. Her name is Deborah Jane Burke. She's out of Burbank, California, who has an incredible story. And she's got a film on, it's actually in the making, and it's on America's history of slavery and racial reconciliation. But it's got time travel, it's got music, it's really incredible. So if you have a chance to check her out, it's Deborah Jane Burke. But for me, you can find me, you can check out our website, and the website is 10 3pr.com, and it's the word 10 and the number 3 pr.com. And I would love it if you go there and sign up for our newsletter, because in this weekly newsletter, I give women tips on how they can elevate their personal brand. I share what's happening in pop culture that will have an impact on how you're stepping out and how you're experiencing and sharing yourself with the world. So please subscribe to the newsletter. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Sharon Robustelli, and then also Instagram, we're at 10, again, the word 10 and the number 3 PR.
Mm, well said. Sharon, I'm so grateful for you joining us today. As expected, so many dimes dropped, and you finished the back nine round in style and shared so many important insights and nuggets that I know our listeners and viewers are going to enjoy. Thank you for your wisdom and your grace, the work that you're doing. I know I learned so much from our conversation today, and I know our listeners did as well, as we all look to elevate and illuminate ourselves and find those that space that we can own for ourselves, the space where we can be our best selves, where we can relax, rejuvenate, enjoy, so that when we do elevate and illuminate our brand, it has the impact that we want. So, Sharon Robustelli, thank you so much for joining us here on Unlocking the Club today. Folks, thanks for joining us today as well, for tuning in on YouTube or listening on your podcast platform of choice. I'm your host, Angela Taylor, and we are so grateful for all of you for continuing to follow us here at Unlocking the Club as we continue to help our guests unlock their truth, share their story, and reclaim their power so that we all can live a better life. Make sure you go to unlockingtheclub.com, subscribe to our newsletter as well so that you can be the first to find out about any special episodes or series that we have coming up. And tell a friend about Unlocking the Club. Go ahead and subscribe today. Until next time, be well.
Thanks for listening to Unlocking the Club. If this conversation resonated with you, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or your favorite streaming platform so that you can experience every episode. And follow us on social media, where you'll hear about future guests, access special features, and connect with this amazing community. Head on over there and let us know how you are unlocking the club. Until next time, peace.